Yeah, welcome to the Making of Me podcast, where we explore stories of resilience, transformation, and mastering life under pressure. Today, we are joined by Rachael Edmondson, a leadership coach, human performance expert, and former corporate executive who knows what it is like to hit burnout. Even while everything looks fine on the outside, Rachel helps leaders thrive sustainably, balancing impact, energy, and well-being. It's really a pleasure having you on the show, Rachel.
Thank you for having me on. As I was just saying before we jumped in live here, I absolutely adore the space that you create here and just your heart in what you're doing. And I think we very much share similar values of growth and learning and development. So I'm so happy to be with you today.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. It's a pleasure having you. So, Rachel, what are some of the challenges that shape you into who you are today?
I was thinking about this question before I came on because becoming who I am today isn't just the result of the big events that have happened to me. Of course, I think they're really important and they often feel very prominent, but it's also the result of how I have become more aware and chosen to respond to the small and everyday pressures and challenges as well when no one's watching. So I think, yes, there are, of course, with all of us, there's lots and lots and lots of things that happen in our lives that shape who we are. And for me, there's lots of little things as well as some standout big ones. And I mean, you mentioned the big moment in my life that really changed everything for me, and that was burnout.
Amazing. So, tell us about your journey from our corporate leadership out to coaching leaders on sustainable high performance.
Oh, goodness. Yes. So I started out working in my mum's hair salon. So
Oh,
I resonate with you because at the age of 12, she had me cleaning, I was sweeping the
wow,
floor,
amazing.
making the teas and coffees, and I was clearing up after everyone. So that's where I kind of started in the world of work. And I worked at the hair salon right through until I'd finished university. And then I joined the corporate world. And my first role was a sales role, and I used to sell vending machines. And I was
Yeah,
really
wow.
I was, I I was so bad at it. And I found myself within the first few months on a performance improvement plan. And I was working for Mars at the time, a company who I had so wanted to work with. And their recruitment process is incredibly tough to get through. And then to make it all the way through the thousands of applicants to get the job at the end, and then within the first few months be on a performance improvement plan was probably one of my first major challenges. But the thing that really shifted for me was my perspective of sales. And that's what changed everything for me. And I think this leads into the work that I do today as well. And that perspective shift for me was when I stopped seeing sales as either some sort of persuasion or selling in its actual, in that sense, but that I started seeing sales as a service and as a way to better understand potential clients and support them and their businesses. And as soon as I felt like I was helping clients, it clicked for me, and I just wanted to get in there and I wanted to help. And I went from being on that performance improvement plan to becoming the field sales manager for the whole of the UK and Northern Ireland. So it just shows how that shift in how
Yeah,
we see ourselves can make such a difference, right?
wow.
That's it.
Wow, that was really amazing. I think, especially when you make reference of other than seeing sales from just cajoling any and any customer, influencing them, or either using any trick at all just to get them to buy, to seeing it as a service, meeting their need and asking where can you help, and seeing yourself as more like, yeah, I'm just here to help them. Like, that was really amazing.
Absolutely. And even if I didn't have the right product or service to be able to give them, or I wasn't the right fit for them at that time, then how might I be able to help them in the conversation, or how might I be able to refer them? because my belief is that then comes that comes back to us at some way in shape and form. It may not be directly, but I think if you can serve people well and look after them, even if they don't end up being your customer, that supports your reputation and your standing, and I trust that's going to come back.
Amazing. So you focus on energy as much as our mindset. How does a leader energy impact their team decision making and influence?
Enormously so. And this perhaps leads back to a little bit more of the story and my own personal experience, and then I can talk about what it means for leaders as well. So after the sales role at Mars, I ended up moving to another company, and I became head of their product strategy. So I was right at the top of my game, and I was in the role that I always thought that I wanted to do. And I felt a huge responsibility for the team, for the company, for the organization's success, actually, because every single product that we made in the organization fell under my responsibility. And I felt this enormous pressure to keep working harder and harder and harder. And I can remember vividly the moment that it happened. So I was in my fronted office and I was preparing to go into the boardroom. And instead of walking out of my office door, I found myself lying on the floor, staring up at the ceiling tiles. I'd collapsed, couldn't think, I couldn't breathe in that moment. It was incredibly frightening. Actually, and at the end of the day, I realized that what I had experienced in that moment was actually a panic attack. But at the time, it felt like something was really, really seriously wrong. And it was very, very difficult for me to be able to pull myself together and get into the boardroom and say anything that made any sense.
Yeah.
That was the result of months and months and months of disrespecting my body, my energy, my biology. And whilst mindset is a huge part of the work that I do, I am massively in support of many of the psychology tools that are out there today. It must never be at the expense of ignoring our biology. I had done that for months and months and months, constantly reframing with a positive mindset that this will be okay. I've just got to get to the weekend or through the project, or ignoring all of the warning signs until my body eventually just went, time out, that's it.
Amazing. And I was glad that you were able to find a way out of it. Yeah. So what was your practical formula for sustainable high performance, and how can listeners start applying it today?
Sustainable high performance for me is as much about restoration, rest and recovery as it is about the actual high performance piece as well. So coming back to what I was saying about mood and emotions, being able to really understand your own mood, your energy, your bandwidth to be able to deal with stress, what the inputs are that serve those and serve those well, is super important. And we can make this really, really simple and easy. I think, a very, very simple way of looking at this is that when we feel a certain thing, don't see it as a problem, see it as a signal. So that's a signal that that something isn't right, and then get curious with that. So what is that? And is that your biology and what's going on inside your skin, so to speak? Let's call it, that's the simplest way I can describe this. But is it because we're hungry? Is it because, and I say that with with huge empathy for some of the challenges at the moment in Nigeria as well. So, is it because that we're hungry? Is it because we we're too hot, or we're too cold? Or is it because we haven't moved our body, or we haven't had daylight or nature? These things are all like top us up in terms of energy and mood and our bandwidth to deal with stress. All the stuff that your grandma would have told you. Have you eaten well? And have you slept? I've not mentioned sleep. That's huge, massively important, like probably the number one thing. How well are we sleeping, and how well are we getting really good with our sleep habits? So looking at those things is paramount. But of course, we don't operate just within our skin. There's a whole
Yeah.
world out there, as listeners will be all too aware.
Yeah.
And there's so many people and things that can trigger us. And so if it's something or someone that has triggered us, what can we do to resolve it ideally? Is there a way that we can fix it? And I appreciate that there's a lot of things out there that there's not this for, but at least if we're trying to make and have some progress towards what those things are, so important. So how can we seek to fix the problem, resolve the issue with the person, maybe have the difficult conversation if we need to do that? And if we can't do either of those two things, then how do we regulate it, and regulate it consciously? And that's where we come back to that positive mindset and how we frame things and have perspectives and so on. So, I think sustainable performance comes from this awareness of this and of honoring what we need, both from a mood and energy perspective, but also from an emotional perspective as well.
Amazing. I think it's the fact that I'll acknowledge what it is and being able to kind of balance it emotionally and in every aspect. But resilience is often glorified in leadership. Why do you say it's overrated? And what do leaders really need to thrive?
I far prefer the word anti-fragile. And is anti-fragile? Yes, you're laughing. You must have heard of
Yes,
anti-fragile.
yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
I've read it.
More and more people, I think, are becoming familiar with the term. When I was first introduced to it several years ago, fewer people knew about it. So resilience for me suggests that, a bit like a coiled spring, with stresses and strains and
Yeah,
challenges, we go back to where we were. Whereas, as
original ship.
you well know, with
Yeah,
being anti-fragile, suggests that those challenges, those stresses, those stress strains, just like if we're, in the gym or we're lifting weights, those micro tears in our muscles, that's what's making our muscles stronger. And so this idea of anti-fragility, the challenges, the stresses and the strains, actually can help us to become stronger and evolve and to grow. Well, I far prefer that than just going back to how we were.
yeah, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, so I think that's, I think that's, and it's that, I guess it comes back down to that belief that the challenges, the stresses and the strains, whether they're little everyday ones or whether they're actually bigger ones, could they all be calling us to grow, to become more for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for the world? Um, and absolutely, it starts with us and it starts within. And coming back to that, I think even just holding that as that thought that although this might be hard, desperately hard right now, if I can somehow see that this is life sent to challenge me rather than punish me, then I can show up in a better way and a more resourceful way for myself and those people that I care about the most.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Especially when you just change the language. I think it's more of changing the language, just as you just said, from seeing it as a problem to being an opportunity for growth, seeing an opportunity for improvement, seeing an opportunity to actually become, yeah, to shape us into who we really ought to be, not the previous version where there is no strain and stress. Yeah, amazing. So how can leaders maintain ambition and deliver results without sacrificing health, relationship, and fulfillment?
Well, that ambition and that drive, I think, really comes from being, and indeed without burning out, comes from being better connected with ourselves and understanding our values and what's most important to us. Now, our values are just experiences, and they're generalizations. So they're just
Yeah.
generalizations of experiences that are important to us. And being clear on what those experiences are, because they will change and they will evolve over time. And so coming back to that as like a north star and as something to review every 3 to 6 months, I think is a really valuable exercise. But when we're living in alignment with those values and we're experiencing more and more of those experiences that are important to us, I think that then naturally feels motivating and joyful. And it's having that clear purpose and reason why we want to, we want to be doing what we're doing. I think that's what provides the ambition, that's what provides the drive. Most of my experience would tell me that when leaders are wanting to contribute to something more than themselves, that's when we show up at another level. I mean, if we just take running a marathon, for example, if you're doing that for yourself and you're training and you're doing that for yourself, versus if you're doing it, say, for a charity or a cause, when you're doing it for more than just yourself, that seems to help you to dig in and go the extra mile. So that would be the ambition bit. And then coming back to what we was just saying, the connection to self. Are you listening to yourself? And this has not been easy for me, and I am still learning all the time how to better listen to myself and how sometimes do what feels counterintuitive. When there's a project or a deadline or a client is desperately needing me, it feels counterintuitive to say, just going to leave that for the moment, because actually what I need to do right now in this moment is take a walk down the end of the street and back again, just get some movement and daylight or whatever it is. Or I need to go eat, or actually I need to go to sleep and I need to look at this in the morning. And that can feel really counterintuitive in the moment. But one of the big things that I have been learning is that in those moments where it feels most counterintuitive to stop the work and to take the rest or to do something that's going to help with the restoration is absolutely the moment that you most need it.
When you just speak volumes, apart from just being motivated, doing what you ought to do, it's very key and important you listen to the inner voice too. That when it's actually more like just talk that, yeah, you need the rest, you should rest rather than just giving that vision while losing yourself. That would be nice. Yeah, amazing. So lastly, for a listener ready to transform their leadership approach, what resources or next step would you recommend?
The next thing that I would suggest that they do would be a values elicitation exercise. So to get clear on what really matters to them. And I do this a lot with with the corporate organizations and leadership groups that I work with, where we'd end up doing full programs. We will start with this because it's okay that maybe the organization that you work for has a set of values, but actually, how do you interpret those and what's important to you in your leadership? So I would start by just asking yourself that question: what's important to you about leadership, and what does that allow you to experience that's important? And start to notice what it is that's important to you about that. And I'm sure, Aro, that we can put some useful links and resources around this show in terms of the notes that would help leaders with that. But that's really that guiding North Star, and being clear on what they are, and then criteria needs to be met for you to experience those values. Because Ara, we might share a value of growth or a value of connection. In fact, I'm pretty certain we do. But your criteria for meeting that value might be different to my criteria. So understanding what that criteria is also an important part of that process, because then we can seek more and more and more of those things that we're aligned to. And it means that when we're looking at reviewing, upgrading, or evolving our leadership, we're doing it in alignment with what matters to us most.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Al. So, Rachel, from our audience who want to reach out to you, who want to learn more about you, and who want to connect with you, where is the best platform to do this?
So I'm on LinkedIn, but the best place to go would be my website, which is elevar.co.uk. but I would love to connect. Please message me if something here has resonated in our conversation today. I'd love to hear from you. So that would be great.
Yeah, amazing. Definitely the link to your website is going to be on the show note for my audience to easily reach out. Rachel, thank you for sharing your insight and life experience with leadership, burnout, and sustainable success. For listener, Rachel's work remind us that thriving in leadership isn't about doing more. It's about aligning energy, impacts, and well-being. And once again, it's really a pleasure having you on the show, Rachel.
Thank you. All right.